What is good, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Cover One Film Room, part, of course, of the Cover One Sports Network. I am one of your two hosts this evening, Anthony Prohaska, joined by Eric Turner. And Eric, in tonight's episode, we are going to dive into some schematic pieces for the Buffalo Bills defense overall, but also with a focus on the linebacker position and the coverages for the Buffalo Bills and how those two things are woven together and have been woven together as we kind of try to project what happens in the 2023 season. Because, Eric, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Tremaine Edmunds is no longer a member of the Buffalo Bills. Did you know this?
I did. And, even when he's, since he's been gone and signed by the Bears, for some reason, we still end up in his mentions.
I was going to say he haunts us still.
Your gift the other night was just perfect, right? It was like, just when I thought I was out, they bring me back in. Like, that's exactly what it is when we talk about the linebacker position. And honestly, I love the linebacker position. Mm-hmm. So any chance we can talk about linebacker, especially middle linebacker in the Bills defense, I'm all for it. And, this narrative, this storyline is not going to go away for a few months now, right? It's going to be a few months till they figure it out. Who's going to be the Mike linebacker? It's an open competition between Dodson, Klein, Bernard Spector, and even Dorian Williams. I mean, basically, if you're a linebacker, you have a shot at playing Mike. Maybe even Saran Neal. Maybe they throw him into the mix. Like, everyone has a shot at the middle linebacker position. And as you said, with Edmunds gone, it's pretty obvious that there's not only a drop physically, because he was a unicorn is what you always call it, right? He was a unicorn. He had the size, the speed, the length, the athleticism, and he played so many reps from day one at that position. Yeah. So he not only had the physical, he also had the mental and stuff that happens pre-snap, post-snap. Like, he was in charge of a lot of that stuff. So he had a huge role. And so that's why we want to kind of break down the defense with him, without him, how teams attacked the defense when he was out, how the Bills basically played their scheme in 2017 when they didn't have Edmunds, when they had Preston Brown, when they had Ramon Humber, and Matt Milano was kind of working into things later that year. So we have a fun episode. We have some analytics. We have some film, of course, film from last year, film from 2017. So grab your beverage and buckle up. We have a fun ride tonight.
Yeah, a really fun ride. That's very well said. And, as you folks have come to expect on this show, we will be diving into the film in this episode and breaking down a lot of coverage, schematics, and tendencies and all those pieces. But like Eric also mentioned, you folks also should know we do bring a lot of the advanced metrics and merge those with the film on this show. But tonight we have a special guest to help us ride through the metrics. Mr. Andrew Stasel, a bit of a graphics guru, a stats guru. Like, you put it all together in a ton of beautiful ways, and you helped us really kind of put some things into perspective tonight from an advanced metrics perspective and stats perspective, all into some really nice graphics. So we appreciate you being here, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. I know the film room does a lot for the Cover One fans out there. So I think pairing the data with the film, it's going to be great to see what we should expect from the linebacker position this season. So I'm very excited to jump in.
Andrew, let's dive right in, because you did, as Ann said, you did some awesome graphics to kind of frame this episode. So we want to start with the impact of Tremaine Edmunds when he was on the field, off the field, and we're going to look at some of the average box numbers, some of zone versus man coverage rates, and even the blitz rate. So break it down for us. In 2022, what was Edmunds' impact when he was on the field and off the field?
Right. So right away, if you're not a data guy, don't worry about it. First line, you can see average box defenders. So on the field, when Edmunds is on the field, there are usually six members of the defense in the box. And then when he's off the field, right away, they got to throw someone else in the box because Edmunds has a huge range. So right away, they already have to compensate for his range, throwing more defenders in the box. And as you can see, as a result, that leaves more for the corners to do, more for the safeties to do. So there's a lot more man coverage being played when Edmunds is taken off the field. They play more zone because they have that extra guy in the box. And as well, because they have that extra guy in the box, they're doing a lot of blitzing because they, want to switch things up, whether they have people in the box or not. So ultimately, though, we can see how Edmunds' athleticism affects exactly what types of things they're running, who's in the box, who's outside the box, what coverages they're in. And ultimately, his athleticism allows him to do that. And since we're losing him, it's going to be definitely something we're going to have to switch up.
Right. And this makes sense logically, right? When you think about it, when Edmunds is on the field, not only are they going to be playing more of those too high coverages and have less guys in the box, they're nickel team. So Taron Johnson's separated, detached from the box. So they average 6 defenders in the box when Edmunds is on the field. And that plays into the run as well. The Bills can do that because of the size and length of Tremaine Edmunds when the run does come that way. So, and that's why they always had so many light boxes, because of guys like Tremaine Edmunds.
Yeah, for as much as he was knocked by the fan base for not making enough splash plays and not showing up on the box score enough, the word that I've continued to use, and Eric, I know you've used it as well, and as unsexy as it is he was such a deterrent for so many things from a coverage standpoint and from a run standpoint because of, again, his size plus his frame plus his athleticism and speed. Like that whole package put together, combined with his experience in the scheme and the system, you could kind of put yourself at a disadvantage in other areas because he would make up for that. He would kind of make you right just by his pure presence and allowed you to, operate, like the graphic shows, operate with less defenders in the box and play certain coverages because of what role and space and responsibility he can occupy and fill. And that's a big change for this defense. Like you see the changes in the numbers here, and we saw it. Again, if anybody kind of thinks back to those games last year, like what did the Bills defense look like against the Cleveland Browns or the Detroit Lions or the back half of the Minnesota Viking game? Like things were different schematically. You could just tell it by watching it on the broadcast. And when you look at the numbers and then watch the film, you could tell they were a different defense when he was off the field. And it's something that they're going to have to adjust around for this upcoming season.
Right. And so on this slide, you do see the impact of Edmunds when he's on and off the field from a defensive perspective. But the next slide we're going to look at some of the tendencies as well, but from the offensive side of the ball. How did offenses attack when Edmunds was on the field versus off the field, Andrew?
Right. So obviously, when you throw another guy in the box, it makes those shorter throws over the middle a lot harder to complete because it's a lot more crowded and congested in there. So those short drop percentages go down when Edmunds comes off the field and that extra guy like Taron Johnson comes into the box. The targets over the short middle of the field, as I said before, they also go down too, just because there's so much going on there. But where we're able to stop and limit those plays that are over the middle of the field, maybe right inside, that 0 to 15-yard window from the line of scrimmage, it does open up things on the boundaries, both in the short game and also the deep game as well. So you can see right away on the short outside targets how when Edmunds is on the field, 32%, and when he's off, it goes up to 36. We can also see the deep outside targets as well. They shoot up, they almost double, which is something that's pretty interesting to look at, just how Edmunds, because of his athleticism, the whole Bills defense operates differently. And you can see how adding that extra player in the box limits what teams can do underneath, but it creates more opportunities on the outside as well as over the top. So you're putting more stress on the secondary that's not in the box, which, luckily we've been drafting a lot of corners and we've invested in the secondary. So, hopefully we can trust those guys when they're on an island playing a lot of man coverage. But yeah, ultimately Edmunds has a big impact, even on, not even in the box. It's on the other team's offense as well. So.
Yeah, and this is something that you and I talked about during the season and even a couple of days ago. And Andrew, you actually did some work on this when we talked about the return of Trey White and how that changed some of the coverages that they did mid-season, where they started running a lot more single high looks, a lot of cover 1 and cover 3 as soon as Trey White came back, even though he wasn't 100%, but it was a flip. It was a flip from, okay, instead of playing in those 2 high coverages, a lot of those quarters or Tampa 2 looks where the Mike linebacker is that deep middle player and the safeties are kind of the other third players in those Tampa 2 type looks. Now you're flipping it. You're having the linebacker stay underneath and the flats defenders underneath, and you're having the 2 corners get back along with 1 post safety. So, and that's something that we saw as soon as Trey White started coming back, right?
Yeah, we saw that shift, and it changes where your strengths are just from a pure numbers perspective. And exactly like Andrew illustrated with the graphic and what he spoke about, if you've got more guys clogging the underneath, it makes you more vulnerable if you've got single coverage, whether in zone or man on the outside, deep or underneath, and you see that impact. And I love this graphic. Eric, we were talking about this one from just a Trey White perspective. Like these are, and we always want to drive home, like percentage points are like each percentage point is significant. Like it's not just, you went from like 23 to 24. Like that's still significant, let alone some of these, like the jump from cover 1 going up 3 percentage points is a lot, but look at the cover 3, like that's going up 10.4 percentage points. That is a huge jump from a percentage point standpoint.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And that's something that we talked about during the year. And that was, I think, when Andrew just first came on too, and he started looking into that. Yeah. So
I think that was one of the first things you were like, hey, I got this thought. Can you put this graphic together?
Yeah, it was it. And so now let's look at, the coverages they play when you're looking at cover 1, 2, 3, like the percentages in 2022, 2021. And then again, that 2017 season when they didn't have Tremaine Edmunds, when Milano was still working into the lineup. So Andrew, talk to us about maybe some of the differences over the last 2 years, or maybe some of the similarities of 2017, or what type of differences we could see.
Yeah, so ultimately, it's very interesting seeing how not having as athletic of linebackers affects the coverage. And you can also see how, right away, if you look from 2017 to 2021, you can see how cover 1 jumped up almost 10%. Yeah. And that's something astounding. And even how cover 3 went down by 11% and then shot back up 5%. So ultimately, when I was going through the data, though, it looks like when we have the more athletic linebackers, what we're able to do is diversify our coverage a little bit. So right away, you can see from cover 3 and cover 2, that makes up about 50% of our coverages in 2017. And then, you go over to 2022, that percentage is a little bit lower, but you can see how, we run a lot more cover 6. Yeah. It's the fact that having that athleticism at linebacker, you're able to diversify your coverage because someone like Tremaine Edmunds can run all over the field. And also looking at it too from a league perspective. So the Bills were 4th in 2017 and 2nd in 2021 in quarters coverage usage. So that's something where, at that point, Tremaine still kind of struggled in coverage in 2021. He wasn't as strong as he was in 2022. And also in 2017, we didn't have him. So those are the types of coverages you're going to have to run more often when you don't have that athleticism at linebacker. And then we can also see too how in 2017, we were right around the middle of the pack in the league in our cover 3 usage, but it fell all the way to the bottom of the league, 31st in 2021 and 30th in 2022. And so you can see right away when Tremaine Edmunds is at his peak, when he's at his best in coverage, we don't really have to run that cover 3 as much, and we start running other coverages. So it's, when you look in 2017, we heavily depended upon cover 3, it being our most popular coverage at 36%. So
yeah, and again, maybe we'll break it down a little simpler. So when you have a guy like Edmunds, and you can play those Tampa 2 cover 2s and quarters, you're going to have less guys underneath. If there's 4 guys getting back in quarters, you're only going to have 3 guys underneath and then the 4 rushers. So it opens some things up, and that athleticism helps that defense run those type of things. And so I did find this interesting, and it kind of plays into the whole discussion about Brandon Beane the other day when he talked about Tremaine Edmunds and what he didn't quite provide for the Bills defense, and getting matched up versus running backs and getting matched up versus slot wide receivers. And I've been taking heat ever since, because I came out and said that Beane overstated that. I think that actually those situations didn't come up often based in the film in the last couple of years. And if they did, let's say hypothetically they did, guys, all right, then why the heck would the Bills be 6th in cover 1 percentage and 4th in cover 2 man percentage over the last 2 regular seasons? If he struggled to match up with the number 3 receiver in the slot, or the running back out of the backfield. Why would they call so much man coverage over the last couple of years? It just didn't match up with what we saw on film, and it definitely didn't match up with a lot of the analytics when you looked at them, right? Ant?
No, and we talked about this briefly on last week's episode. He being Brandon Beane kind of made some statements the day that Dorian Williams was picked that it seemed like he was trying to backtrack a little in the next several days, and that included both with what he was saying about Dorian Williams himself, but also with what he said about Tremaine Edmunds. Like on day one, he's saying like, well, this guy comes from a simple scheme and we're more complex and, kind of want to ease him in. We'd like him to be a dual guy, but we don't really see him being a dual guy. And it seemed like he kind of felt the heat for that. And then 2 days later, it was like, no, Dorian Williams is exactly what we're looking for at linebacker. And Tremaine Edmunds sucks. He can't cover any little guys and this and that. It's just like, okay, now it's.
And if that's true, again, if hypothetically, if that's true, how have you gotten better in that? How did you upgrade that? If that's the issue, how did you upgrade that? You didn't. So I call BS on that. That was my entire point with that.
And it just, again, he made the initial statement and kind of swung this way and felt the heat and was like, oh, now I got to swing back this way to try and meet it in the middle and kind of course correct a little bit. And Eric, exactly like you said, like you look at the metrics, you're not playing those too high shells and those too high coverage structures if you are not comfortable with your linebacker in the middle, carrying and covering a variety of ways. And Eric, we got, God knows how many times you've shown it on Twitter. I've shown it on Twitter. We've shown it here. He's dropping in the deep third in Tampa 2, or he's, walling off and being that wall defender underneath, or he's carrying slot guys. And whether it's
like deep overs or verticals, it's crazy.
He's carrying Mecole Hardman, a 4-3 wide receiver on a 25-yard post. He's matching with tight ends. Like, even though Adam Thielen doesn't have a ton left in the tank against the Vikings last year, like he's shutting Adam Thielen down on option routes underneath and just being a one-man army underneath in that regard. So Beane's statements didn't match up with the film and with the analytics, and especially when you look at it from a coverage standpoint, even when you're not just focusing on Edmunds, when you look at those coverage numbers that, we just showed in that pie chart, it's significant. There are significant differences year after year. And when you compare the pre-Edmunds linebacking core with the Edmunds linebacking core these past 2 years and the coverages they played, it puts together that story of how the coverage structures were kind of built around Tremaine Edmunds' skill set, and what he did in the middle allowed them to do what they did on the back end.
All right. And so, Andrew, now Edmunds is out of the picture. So, as we said, every linebacker on the roster has a shot, and we should probably even put Medikevich in there. Every linebacker has a shot at Mike this season. So now let's take a look at those guys. Let's not talk about Edmunds this entire episode. He's gone. Some of the other guys that we're showing on the screen here some of them have a lot of, a decent amount of reps in this defense. If you're talking about AJ Klein and Tyrell Dodson, some of the younger guys that the Bills invested in, Terrell Bernard and Balin Spector. So what did you find when it came to their performance in coverage?
Yeah, I apologize, Tyler Medikevich. I'm sorry I didn't put you in the graphic.
He's going to be pissed.
Yeah, I'm going to get DM'd for that. Sorry.
I don't think he searches his name on Twitter, though, so he might be all right.
Ooh, shade.
I hope so. But yeah, you can just see from looking at the graphic, from looking at the stats, that Terrell Bernard is probably the best coverage linebacker of these guys. You can also, too, I was looking into the RAS scores. A lot of these guys are very, very similar. I know AJ Klein is probably not up there with like Dodson, Spector, and Bernard, but in terms of RAS and athleticism and the types of athletes they are, it seems like they're just like, okay, let's get someone who's 6'1", 235, 6'1", 235. It just seems like they're trying to basically say, okay, we don't have Edmunds anymore, as you guys said. Throw Edmunds out of the show now. Let's get 3 guys in there that sort of do similar things athletically wise, and let's just throw it in there and see what they can do. And you can see Bernard with the lowest amount of average yards attempt allowed, with almost under 5, which is very low considering you see like Balin Spector is over 8, and then Dodson and Klein are pretty close to 8 there. Then allowing the yak after attempts. So some of that is dependent on the types of targets that they're getting in coverage. But also some of that too is, I don't know how many times I've been watching a Bills game where somebody, it's 3rd and 6 and somebody catches the ball 2 yards before the sticks, and then somebody has to make a move, and one of these guys has got to make a tackle. So that's a big stat that I usually pull out in coverage. Like how soon are you able to make that tackle? And Spector and Bernard are also leading the pack in that regard. And then also the passer rating allowed. So how successful are passers against these guys? And you can see Bernard leading the way again. So I would say in this area, Bernard is probably the strongest coverage linebacker. And then I'd probably say Klein is probably towards the end. That's not saying Klein's a bad player or anything, but I think
nice way to backtrack, way to sugarcoat.
Well, yeah,
no, take it easy, Brandon Bean.
sorry. I mean, I like him. I was glad the Bears cut him because then we could get him. But yeah, no, I just think in terms of coverage and the ways that we want to compensate for Edmunds leaving in coverage, it looks like Bernard is probably our best coverage linebacker outside of Milano.
Now, are these stats for just the regular season?
No, these should be playoff and as well as a regular season.
Okay, so and because we have a question about, do we have the snap counts on that? So obviously, if it's just regular season, not preseason, the total snaps for Balin Spector were 12, so it's a very small sample, but 11 of those were in coverage. So relatively speaking, it was mostly coverage. Terrell Bernard had 111 total snaps, 57 in coverage. Dotson had 220 snaps, 137 in coverage. And the thing when they drafted, Dorian Williams, it was okay. Dotson and Bernard are like core special teams guys. Like you look at their snaps, most of their snaps are on special teams. Same with Dorian Williams. Dorian Williams coming out of college had a lot of snaps on special teams. So my logical explanation was, okay, Dorian Williams probably not gonna be ready year one, especially after you heard what Bean said. He fills in to one of either Bernard or Dotson's reps on special teams and becomes that core special teams player for whichever linebacker wins the Mike position, right, Ant?
Man, I just had a flash of Dotson winning the Mike, and I was just like, "Oh my God, no!" Yeah, that makes sense. Like you're kind of just looking at it from like a promotional hierarchy to a degree. Like if somebody steps up here, you got to have somebody else fill that spot, and we know how much the Bills value special teams. It's a thing that I think is kind of growing to be a bit of a divisive topic amongst the fan base with how many like special team guys Sean McDermott and Brandon Bean roster and bringing guys in, and I think that was also part of the Dorian Williams piece. Like Brandon Bean's talking about like, yeah, we're going to ease him along, but he's going to be a core special team guy. And we're excited for that. And everybody's like, special teams, like you took a guy in the 3rd round to be a special teamer. Like what the hell is this? Especially after kind of Bernard was that last year.
Yeah.
But that makes sense with the promotional or progressional like hierarchy. We expect one of these linebackers that we put there, Dorian Williams, I don't want to completely discard him here, but Eric, I think you're in a similar boat. Like he's more of a developmental guy and kind of more of a long shot to start this year in 2023. So
he's a year 2 type player. Like
exactly.
You want him ready for year 2.
Yep. So 2024 is really his landmark. And so if that's the case, then you're looking for exactly like you said, like a Terrell Bernard or Dotson or Spector or Klein to step into a starting role. And with the guys who we think really have a good shot at occupying that starting spot, Dorian Williams will then fill into their special teams role, which still has value, especially as the guy kind of learns the position and kind of gets ready for those upcoming seasons.
Right. And so, Andrew, to round this out, we're going to take a look at the success rate by coverage versus those 4 defenders. So what did you find out among these 4 linebackers here on the Bills?
Yeah, so we can see just right away, there are colors and numbers and bar charts. So if you're reading this right away, the red is good. So if you're seeing, across the bottom, there's bars, and you can see how for each bar, it's a different type of coverage. So you start all the way on the left end, and it's cover 0, and you continue all the way to cover 6. And the red bars are good, and the blue bars are bad. And anything in the middle is anything in the middle. Okay. And so right away you can see Terrell Bernard. He has the most red bars. So if you're very simple, just want to look at colors, he has the most red bars. So which that tells us is that he is the best in multiple different types of coverage. Right. So he's not putting, and that again is that success rate. So the success rate is a PFF metric. I know some people don't like PFF metrics, whether it's the pass blocking metrics or the win rate metrics, but ultimately what this does measure is, are you able to cover your guy? Are you able to stay on the field or not? Are you a liability? And you can see Bernard's holding his ground the best out of any of these guys. And looking at this too, even across different people, you can see Klein as well. There's a lot of dark blue there.
You're such a hater, man.
Yeah, man, you were just burying AJ Klein.
I'm an AJ Klein fan. But the numbers and the colors tell us one thing, and my heart might tell me something else.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it does look like cover 4 or quarters coverage is something that's actually in that blue color for each player. So that's something that's a little concerning.
That matches up what we were just talking about at the beginning, right?
Exactly. And these guys don't necessarily have that same athleticism that Edmunds does. And so when they put them in those situations, they're not performing as well, which indicates that they would have to change their scheme in some way. So
I love when the numbers match the eye test.
Yes,
Anthony, it makes me so happy. And when you can have a guy like Andrew come on and just reinforce and validate so many things that you say from watching film, it's just nice to have Andrew on. We should have Andrew on more.
We should, yeah. I mean, it's nice to have somebody who is doing work independent of our individual film study and then coming to conclusions that we've come to with the film. Granted, we use advanced metrics as well, but to be able to put it into this perspective and kind of wrap it all up in a nice, neat little bow and have it, again, like mesh and match with what we're seeing on the film is, Andrew, it's legitimately like a huge joy to be able to see everything just in a nice, neat graph and just be like, this is what I thought I saw. Fantastic. Like, it's extremely comforting. It's like a nice warm blanket.
Yeah.
And like Eric said, Andrew, it was awesome to have you kind of kick us off here on this episode with all the metrics and your insight into the numbers and mathematical, perspective. Mathematical, not mathematical. That's not a thing. The mathematical side of things and how you put it all together. So 1, you crushed it as expected. So well done. 2, thank you very much for joining us on the beginning. 3, just in case people don't know, tell everybody what you do, plug your social, anything and everything, your work, the floor is yours to, speak about whatever you like.
Yeah, I was going to say, I appreciate you guys calling me a warm blanket. I'm sure AJ Klein and his family are probably calling me a wet blanket right now.
You're so bad right now.
And I'm sure there's probably people in the chat that are probably getting mad at me, but yeah. So my name is Andrew Stasel, as said before. And my Twitter is Statistics, so it's like statistics,
awesome
but my last name.
Tremendous pun for your well done.
I love
you have
dad
one of the
jokes.
best Twitter handles. Absolutely, it's great.
It's great.
I love dad jokes. So yeah, that's find me on Twitter. I contribute a lot on the back end to what Eric posts. So I end up making a lot of graphics. I'm not necessarily anybody that has that like graphics experience, but I do love showing data to any Bills fan or any fan of football. So yeah, just find me on Twitter. You can stay engaged with Cover One throughout the whole off season, because, even though it's summertime and people are starting to head out to Niagara Falls or whatever, we're still crunching numbers and grinding the tape. So exactly.
No doubt about it, man. Now, Andrew does do a lot on the back end, a lot of stuff that you guys probably don't see. And we got him working on some special projects for Cover One as well. And he's going to be a big part of our future. So again, thank you for all you do for Cover One. Thank you for joining us in the film room, man. And thank you for, making us feel good about ourselves when it came to some of this data in that film on the impact of Edmunds when he was on and off the field, but also, the future at linebacker when it comes to the Bills. So Andrew, thanks again, man. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Man, he's awesome.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Like, we need to incorporate that a little more just because, again, we usually do it ourselves, but all that research, we don't really have the time to make those cool visuals for all you guys. This is a show, obviously, that's on video. We do a lot of film, but when it comes to graphics, we don't usually have the time to do all that because we're cutting up film and everything else. So it's nice to have those visuals for people like me that need those visuals to learn and to really pull up and pause and take a snapshot. So once your buddy at the bar is talking out of his ass, you can be like, no. The guys at cover one, they already looked into that, and here's the proof.
That should be like the tagline, like cover one, like to be used to shut your buddy up at the bar. Like that is what we're here for. And it's nice to have, because we rattle off a lot of like numbers and metrics and pair it all together. But sometimes, especially when you're really going into a lot of numbers and a lot of analytics, it's nice to just have it right there, like in a nice succinct graph or chart or whatever, to kind of really put everything into perspective. And, Eric, as we kind of transition to the film, I thought Andrew's, advanced metrics and charts and everything really put this conversation into perspective and also kind of set the table for what we're going to look at on tape, because what we've been getting at, and we talked about this pre-free agency when we talked about what this defense would or could look like in the absence of Tremaine Edmunds, and Andrew's data backed it up with what we talked about then, what we showed on film throughout the year and throughout the offseason leading us up to this point, which is if Tremaine Edmunds goes, which he has, and you are not able to replace him with a, like for like player, which is hard because he is a unicorn, you are going to have to significantly change your coverage structures in terms of frequency and what you use and how you use it and when you use it. And we saw those numbers from Andrew. And again, it kind of sets us up for this conversation of, whoever is the middle linebacker, we expect a significant change in terms of that role and responsibility because you don't have a unicorn at that spot anymore.
Yeah, and so things are going to change philosophically. You guys have been saying in the chat since the show started, they're going to have to tweak some things. Now, John says this defense is going to be awesome. I'm excited because as we talked about in several episodes this offseason, new film, new scheme, tweaks in scheme, new philosophy, whether they're a little more aggressive. Spud says winter is coming, boys. Winter is coming.
Nice.
And so, we are excited. And so with that whole conversation about the Mike linebacker position and the coverages the Bills played when Edmunds was on versus off the field, they're going to have to do some things differently on the back end. And so now we're going to take a look at some clips on things that they can do strategically, schematically, with McDermott taking over. And, one of the first things that comes up, Ant, is, using your personnel differently, right? Using your personnel differently. So this is a cut from 2017 where the Bills were playing cover one, deep post safety, as you can see. And they, instead of having the second linebacker on the field, they actually had their big nickel right here on the field in man coverage. Now, where I think it'll be different for the Bills, they're not going to have Preston Brown at their linebacker position. This would be like, okay, we're bringing in Taylor Rapp right here, and then this is Matt Milano. So that is something they could do, right? They could take the Mike linebacker off the field, keep Milano in as that middle linebacker, quasi middle linebacker, and then throw Taylor Rapp in there to play more coverage based schemes, man coverage based schemes like this.
Absolutely. That's been something we've talked about on the show. And it's honestly a really intriguing piece. Like, what is Taylor Rapp going to look like in this defense? Because it's not just from his standpoint or the safety standpoint, because it will tie in with the linebackers in terms of being that kind of dime linebacker on obvious passing downs or third down scenarios. And these are the type of looks, Eric, that we like. We like mugging the A gaps and just kind of showing something at the line of scrimmage and then popping out of it on the snap. And right now you've got that front where you're kind of looking and thinking, okay, like we have to account for Preston Brown, who circled there. You've got the big nickel highlighted there in the slot, but you're looking right now like, okay, there's 5 declared rushers, basically. Maybe that big nickel, he's showing kind of maybe like he's looking in the backfield like he wants to rush. Like, okay, who are we IDing? They look like in their man, they're going to be in man coverage, but are they actually going to be in man coverage? And then at the end of the day, it's just a 4-man rush, and you've got Preston Brown hanging out as that low hole player, and you're just playing straight up man coverage with a post safety on the back end, and it leads to an incompletion because of the coverage structure you have and the confusion you created.
Right, and so now we're going to look at some Terrell Bernard film from last preseason, and this is one thing that keeps standing out when we watch his film, and it's something that was talked about when he was drafted and going into the draft altogether, was his ability to communicate with his teammates prior to the snap, getting them lined up, but also post snap. So this is very much in the same vein where the defense is in man coverage, and they got 3 eligibles to the top of the screen into the short side of the field. And so as that shift happens, as that motion happens, look at him communicating to Jaquan Johnson right here to the top of the screen, making sure everyone is on the same page. And this is that push call that we always talk about. So instead of, as this running back exits outside the tackle box, right? There's a tackle box. As he exits outside, instead of having him have to work through traffic, they call a banjo coverage. They call a push. And all that means that the linebacker Bernard is pushing him right there. You see him point out, pushing him to Jaquan Johnson. Jaquan Johnson takes the running back, and then Bernard is taking the crossing route, the tight end, and he gets a piece of him. He gets a really good piece of him, shuts him down, and the pass goes incomplete on this play. It's 3rd down. So this shows up a lot on his film, that ability to communicate, and it's something that, anytime Brandon Beane or Sean McDermott were asked about Tremaine Edmunds, is always about all the things he does prior to a snap or what he does in the film room. It was always stuff from the shoulders up, not necessarily the stuff that was athletically asked of him, right, Ant?
Yeah, and they echoed similar sentiments for Terrell Bernard. I'm trying to remember the quote from Brandon Beane last year, but I think he called Terrell Bernard like a chalkboard guy or like a classroom guy because of how smart he is and how quick he picks everything up, and he's able to communicate that to his teammates. And you see the ownership that he's taking on the field. Granted, this is preseason last year, but the ownership that he's taking already in the defense
early,
early, like into his NFL career. And you saw what he did on that previous play, and you get a similar action here again, like where he is communicating post snap to his teammates on the back end and saying, okay, here they go. You know what? And you see him call it out again with his left hand. Nope, you sit, you take that. I'm taking this crosser. And he comes up, picks up Michael Pittman, and then you see Kyer Elam
totally disrupts him, right? Like that's
Absolutely.
the thing. Like he doesn't let that guy have a free release on that drag route across the middle, gets a piece of him, redirects him, disrupts that timing.
He smothers him completely. Like there's nowhere to go for Matt Ryan. And then you have Elam who pulls off his man and kind of floats it in the middle of the field, kind of replaces Bernard a little bit, just further up the field than where Bernard was initially. And everybody's picked up. And part of that is because of that post-snap communication from Terrell Bernard. This is where, and you circled it there, like it's on 4th down. It's a key moment. It's a critical down. This is where he has such an advantage over Dorian Williams or even Terrell Dodson inclined to a degree because he's got more coverage athleticism and coverage ability. And you combine that with how strong he is in between the ears mentally, like that's not an easy thing. And again, this was against the Colts first teamers. Granted, the Colts had a bad year last year. He comes up and he communicates, and you see Elam and Johnson work together on the back end. And then Terrell Bernard's picking up Michael Pittman, who's a good receiver in his own right, completely smothers him, takes him away. And then Matt Ryan's forced to kind of chuck it further on that outside route, which he doesn't want to go to on 4th down, and you get an incompletion and a stop.
Right. And so same coverage and same switch. You get that banjo coverage with that running back releasing outside. And so the Colts come back with a counter. And so what teams will do is, well, they won't just run this crossing route anymore. If they see that banjo happening, what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, if this safety is going to go ahead and push with that running back, well, we're going to run this guy away from the help over the middle. So now Bernard has to, undercut this, and he's got a long ways to cover to do it. The ball goes in another direction, but again, it shows the physical stuff from the mental stuff from the shoulders up and understanding that, hey, I'm not going to just cheat and take it because it's going to be a crosser. No, they throw that corner route at him, and he's able to pick it up down the field. And Ant, I just also love when analytics match the film, but I also love when film from college of Bernard matches the film that we see in the NFL on Sunday. So similar type thing. You see 3 eligibles to the bottom of the screen. Bernard is one of the inside linebackers, and they run that corner route with the tight end who's in line. So this guy right here, he's running that corner route, and you get the same call on the back end, that push call, that banjo call. And what does Bernard do? He pushes that running back to his teammate, and then he goes and gets under that tight end who's running that corner route. This is the type of stuff that translates, and really why Dave Aranda has such a high,
appreciation
for by Sean McDermott. That's his boy. That's part of his inner circle, because not only does Bernard have the stuff from the shoulders up that Aranda knows McDermott would love, but he also plays a lot of the same techniques in his defense. And this one was one of those cuts from Aranda's time at Baylor.
Yeah, this was one of the pieces that made him an attractive target to the Bills defense because he comes from that Aranda system, which preps you and primes you pretty well for the pros in terms of your responsibilities and what's asked of you and the roles you have to occupy. And again, we see it from the shoulders up. We see the communication. We see that switch and that banjo call. And I like how he operates once the route distribution starts to develop. Like, you see him ID Deuce Vaughn leaking out to the flats. So boom, they switch. He picks up 19. Look at the angle that he takes, how he gets underneath it, because he knows the coverage man that he has over the top. There's nowhere to go. That tight end is completely X'd out, as the graphic shows there. Well done. And there's nowhere to go. Like, that's also part of it too, right? Knowing your angles to the ball carrier and how can you get yourself in between the quarterback and his intended receiver, and what angles can you take away. If he takes a slight misstep or rounds it out too much and is kind of lazy in his footwork, like, there's still an opportunity for the quarterback to fit that ball in, but he takes such a prime angle after, processing everything, that there's nowhere to go. And that's the type of pro-ready stuff you like to see. And that's something that, again, will translate and has translated, although briefly, in his NFL career so far.
All right. And I don't want to pick on Spectre, but you'll see the difference on this play. It's the same type of thing. All right. They're getting a crossing route over the middle, and you can see the corner push it to Spectre in the middle of the field. And watch Spectre. He does a good job of IDing it. But what he does is he tries undercutting it too much. He goes too low, and that guy just adjusts his route on the mesh concept and gets behind him. And this is one heck of a throw and catch by this wide receiver, but it just shows you the slight difference when you talk about angles, when you talk about ID and things, and then just making a play at the catch point. So it's a good identification by Spectre, but it's played slightly differently than the way you saw Bernard do it several times in the same game.
Yeah, Bernard does it so efficiently and with a lot of regularity because it was asked of him so much. And you hit it on the head here with Spectre and putting these plays back together or back to back with one another. Spectre does a really good job, like, mentally. Like, he IDs it, he communicates. You see the corner on the backside calls it out as well. So he drops off. You see 32 coming across. He stops, he drops, and then you've got Spectre picking up that crosser underneath on that drag route. But like you said, it's just the wrong angle. He gets a little too underneath it, gets a little too shallow, and then doesn't get his head turned around and make a play on the ball. And I think this play also really highlights how many things can potentially go wrong for you as a defender in this defense. Like, you have to ID what's going on post snap and process accurately and efficiently. And then you have to take the right steps to the ball. You have to make a play on the ball if the ball gets thrown your way. Like, there's so many opportunities for you to fail and or falter. And that's what happens to Spectre on this play. Like, he starts out, like, does a really good job, but he just isn't able to finish because he can't connect 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and you get a completion. But again, kudos to Denver, because that was a good catch and good throw, but still on him.
Right. So we looked at some of those cover one calls, some of the techniques they can use to really compensate for the lack of athleticism, and how these linebackers are going to have to start to play from the shoulders up, maybe even more, because they don't have the athletic side that Tremaine Edmunds did. So now if we flash back to 2017 and how the Bills scheme things up, as Andrew broke down just a few minutes ago, we're going to start to see some pretty fun stuff, some odd front type stuff, and then mixing it up and changing the picture pre to post snap. But more importantly, making the offensive line and the quarterback block up the front properly and not be able to totally ID the guys up front. So let's start with this. Now we're into cover 2. We got past cover 1, and we're going to go into a cover 2 looks, Tampa 2 looks. This is an odd man front, but it's an 8-man cover 2 type coverage. And teams like to run this when they don't have an athletic linebacker. So Preston Brown is right here. He's that deep hole player still. But what teams do is they drop out that extra guy. And on this play, it's Lorenzo Alexander. He's the low hole player. So now Preston Brown, as he's dropping out into that deep middle, again, think about it this way. In many ways, this is like a cover 3 type defense with 3 deep, right? In many ways, that's what Tampa 2 is. And again, if you go to cover 3, it's a flip side. Instead of that linebacker getting deep, you're getting a post safety and 2 corners back. So it's a little different approach. You're keeping your linebackers underneath, 4 defenders underneath, 3 deep. So on this play, he can just worry about taking anything vertical. staying vertical, getting down the field. He doesn't have to worry about dropping and then cutting back when they check it down to a running back, which they often do against the Bills. And that's what you saw Tremaine Edmunds make a lot of tackles in that 5 to 7 yard range or lower, because he does that deep drop in Tampa 2. Oh, they're checking it down because everyone's deep. Okay, now he's got to redirect. Well, you can't ask Preston Brown to do that. You can't ask Dodson to do that on a regularity. So what they do is they drop out a low hole player. That's Lorenzo Alexander. So Mike linebacker, just get deep, play that deep high hole player, and then we'll drop someone underneath to worry about the stuff underneath. And you see, that's one of the things that teams can do. And this was exciting from the sense that, hey, they're showing, several guys up near line of scrimmage, but they also drop guys out, and 8 of them into coverage on this play.
Yeah, similar to the very first clip we showed here in the film room tonight, where you're showing like 5, 6 guys at the line of scrimmage, and it's like, okay, who's rushing and what coverage are they playing on the back end? This time, you get 6 guys up at the line of scrimmage, and they don't even rush 4; they rush 3. Jerry Hughes also does a nice job getting around the left tackle there and getting the pressure. And like you said, like it creates some confusion. You have some chaos that it creates for Miami, but you're not asking a ton of Spencer Brown, of Preston Brown. You're asking him, hey, this is your responsibility. Just drop, carry somebody vertical. We're not asking you to have to, live underneath and live deep, because we recognize you don't have the athleticism. And that's where, if you have players that are deficient in certain areas, you can scheme things up to cover up for their vulnerabilities and their deficiencies and play more to their strengths. You can just scheme it up in certain ways.
Yeah, and here's another one. Again, Lorenzo Alexander was a different cat.
Yes.
He's a different cat. So he really could be that pass rush threat. So again, this is one they actually only send 3 here, and they drop, again, Zoe underneath here. But again, that Tampa 2 type look at Preston Brown just getting deep and, covering up that player Kelsey in the middle of the field. And it's forcing Alex Smith to step up and rush the ball there. And this is 3rd down. He stopped short of the play. So those are the type of things that you can do, especially if you're talking like 3rd and long, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 10 or long. You can, flood those zones and drop 8 in the coverage. Here's another one, but this is a different rotation. This is more of a cover 3 buzz look. So I want you to watch pre-snap, watch the safeties and how they rotate pre to post snap. And once again, it's a 4-man rush this time, but they're bringing this safety down. And I love on the snap, like how they're still playing games. He's making it look like he's going to drop out, but he's dropping down into the hole, and that ball goes right to him as Humber gets out to the flats on this cover 3 look. And then you see the safety, Micah Hyde, right there at the catch point on this play. I just love some of the rotations and personnel groupings that they did in 2017 when, again, they didn't have quite the athletes at the linebacker position. Again, Milano's not even inserted into the lineup here.
Yeah, so you don't have that Milano athleticism, that Tremaine Edmunds athleticism here. So you hit that point too. I love how it's initially a 2 high shell already, and then Hyde's just little subtlety of on the snap, be like, okay, here I go, psych, and just like comes up, and then of course it's like he's reading a hot route and just comes right immediately and closes down and clicks and closes on that slot receiver. But this is another example of what you can do, or maybe even what you need to do when you don't have that kind of athleticism consistently on the second level across your linebackers. Instead of just being more vanilla or static and just saying like, no, like we're going to play these couple coverages because we have the athleticism and the smart guys to be able to execute it consistently. If you don't have that mentally or physically in this instance, because of who you had at linebacker, you just play some more games. And so, okay, let's disguise more coverage on the back end. Let's combine that with disguising our fronts in terms of what we're going to show and who's going to rush and who's going to drop. And is it man and is it zone? And is somebody going to be a low hole guy? From Alex Smith's perspective, this route was wide open. It looked like a 2 high coverage pre-snap. It even looked like a 2 high coverage on the snap. And then Micah Hyde buzzes down and just reads it perfectly. Smith thought he had a guy wide open who beat Ramon Humber, and instead he just played right into the defense's hands. Again, another example of how you can scheme things up to mitigate some of the lack of athleticism you may have at the linebacker position.
Yeah, and these type of coverages that spin like this, and the confusion and the change pre to post snap on this 3rd down, it can confuse wide receivers as well. This wide receiver looks like he's running some type of option route here. That's why he's slow playing it there. And then right here, he's like, okay, I should probably just be hooking up, but he continues down the seam, because it is, going to a cover 3 type look. So seam's usually wide open, but because the safety is going from high to low and coming down into the box. You can't run that seam route. He should have immediately, once he cleared Humber, he should be showing his numbers to his quarterback, sitting right there, catching the ball, getting the first down up the field. But no, that's where these rotations can confuse not only a quarterback, but also wide receivers from time to time. And here's another odd front look. It's a simulated pressure. You see everyone up near the line of scrimmage, but post-snap, you're going to see high drop down to the strong side, hook the curl area, and that cover 3 buzz type look. And once again, it confuses the quarterback, but it also, and he does a little thing that Allen and Mahomes had done many times, is kind of try to skirt out the back of the pocket to buy time. You see him right there, and it screws him. It screws his tackles over, and now you have pressure in his face. And so this is all good coverage. You see the great rotation on the back end in cover 3, and the ball goes incomplete over the top of the wide receiver. It's not even close. Again, this is a 3rd down call. So, showing guys near the line of scrimmage, yeah, maybe they're not the most athletic guys, and Lorenzo Alexander, Ramon Humber, Preston Brown, but the way that they could disguise things and drop guys out, send guys, that's where maybe we're going to see a little more philosophy and strategy from McDermott, right? We talked about, they may bring more pressure, but it's showing pressure and making them feel that pressure, that illusion of pressure, but then dropping out into normal cover 3.
And even with this one, like we started to see on the snap what we've seen in a bunch of those clips where it was, okay, we're going to show 6 and then we're only going to rush 4. We're going to rush 3. And even up front on the snap, kind of like what Micah Hyde did on the back end. And in the previous play we just showed, you have Lorenzo Alexander lined up. He goes forward initially, and then drops back and turns, like he turns fully like he's about to run up field and get vertical, and instead pulls like a double psych, like I'm rushing, just kidding, I'm dropping, just kidding, I'm actually rushing. And even that little like wrinkle added in. So it looks like, okay, you got 6 guys on the line, who's coming? Then on the snap, it looks like it's a 3-man rush. Then it actually turns into a 4-man rush. And then you've got cover 3 on the back end with that buzz safety coming down in Micah Hyde. It's just all this mental workload that you place on the offense. The offensive line has to set their protection rules based off of what they're showing initially. And so now you're playing games with their protection, and then you're playing games with the quarterback because you're changing the pre to post snap picture on him potentially and confusing him. If he thought, 5 or 6 guys were going to come, and then it looks like there's 3, but it's actually 4. And then he's diagnosing that while also trying to read what's happening on the back end. You're creating that mental overload, and it's a way to win, as clearly as we saw, because this Bills defense in 2017 was very successful.
Yeah, and here's another rotation into cover 3. Again, the safeties, this time Jordan Poyer is confusing the quarterback and selling like he's dropping into that deep half as the ball is snapped. But what you're going to see him do is just come down into that hook the curl area as they rotate to cover 3. Trey White's playing with great zone eyes here, looking at the wide receiver through to the quarterback. Great anticipation by Alex Smith here. Good eye discipline. He snaps over to the right side and tries throwing it to that little curl route right at the sticks, and Trey White is able to jump it for the interception. These type of rotations can confuse even some of the most veteran quarterbacks. And you saw it here, and I know it's Alex Smith, but again, we're just trying to frame what the Bills can do to compensate for linebackers, and cover 3 is one of those coverages. I mean, look what Preston Brown's doing. All he's doing is dropping that hook to curl area. You're not asking a lot of your linebackers to play hook to curl areas in the underneath zones in these cover 3 looks. But while it's an easy job, everybody has to work together to sell one thing, sell that too high coverage, but then see that safety drop down into that single high cover 3 look, and your corners, again, playing into it, playing with good zone eyes. These are ways to compensate for less athleticism at the Mike linebacker position.
And, whoever ends up starting for the Bills at that Mike spot this year, if let's say it is Terrell Bernard, he's a better coverage player athletically and mentally than Preston Brown was. So you have a little bit of an uptick there, although it is, a drop off from Tremaine Edmunds. But Eric, like you said, like these are just all examples of, okay, if you're a coach, how can you compensate or mitigate that loss? Or you can lean into the roster piece as well and know, like, okay, we've got this tremendous safety tandem. We've got this tremendous all-pro corner.
Yes.
Maybe we ask a little more of them.
Rely on them.
Exactly. And ask a
Mhm.
little less of our linebackers. And that's what you see on this play. Like, you see Poyer buzzing down. And I love how Trey White plays this because he knows he's got Poyer inside him. So he
Mhm.
doesn't have to completely overcommit. He doesn't have to close down once he sees the wide receiver flashing inside. No, he can keep his eyes on the quarterback and watch the wide receiver through to the quarterback. And he knows he has that inside help. And it turns into almost like a little bit of a bracket coverage out of
Mhm.
this cover 3 look. And when you get a misfire from Alex Smith and he throws it a little behind his man, Trey White's in perfect position because he knew what he had. And this is what you can do again when you've got a smart safety like Jordan Poyer who can play some games on the back end, but then who can read the route distribution and get to his zone coverage and responsibility. And then someone like Trey White, like you said, who has those great zone eyes, who can play the smart. We've seen Trey make so many plays in zone coverage where
Mhm.
he knows his responsibility, but he's reading everything out and kind of flowing with the play. And when he knows where everyone else is, it allows him to jump routes. He did it here. Makes me think back to the interception he had against Russell Wilson and the Seahawks
Oh, yeah.
during the COVID year.
Yep.
Just his ability to make plays on the ball. And, again, no disrespect to anybody who fills Tremaine Edmunds' shoes, but that's a drop off at that spot. So if you have a
Mhm.
drop off there, cool. Where can you kind of create some strengths or create some pieces to mitigate that drop off? Do it with your strong players on the back end or do it schematically or both.
I love your point about Trey White and how he plays this there. He doesn't have to be over aggressive. He doesn't have to try to break on the inside here. He's got that help in that hook to curl area. And I honestly think, I think Alex Smith saw, because if you watch and track his helmet right here, he's looking at Poyer. I think he knows Poyer's dropping into that area. And I think he purposely threw it to the outside shoulder on this trajectory, thinking that, hey, you know what? This guy's a deep third player. He's not going to be there.
He's gonna keep
But Trey
dropping.
White, Trey White, again, played with very good zone eyes and discipline here, and he's able to, reel in that interception. So these are the fun things that they can do. And here's another thing. So we're in the red zone here, and you have a trip set to the top of the screen, and you're not going to ask your linebacker, you're not going to ask, Tyrell Dotson or Bernard to play one-on-one with a slot receiver all that often. We always talk about this defense being one that pattern matches, one that likes to play these type of banjo coverages to maintain leverage, whether it's a numbers advantage or a spatial advantage, maintaining that leverage. And so you're not going to ask him to cover, I think this is Amendola right there, motioning. And while they do make it look like man coverage because of Brown's movement there, what they're doing, and you can see it, they call this a box coverage. It looks like it's box coverage. So they're just pattern matching. And so they let the wide receiver routes, distribute. And then you can see Preston Brown right there. Again,
Bang.
that collision, boom, collision point, just like we saw Bernard do early in this cut up. And everyone else, kind of covers down. They got guys over the top, a safety over the top with this corner on Gronk. And Milano was one-on-one with this running back out of the backfield. So these are ways that you're going to see the Bills, regardless of what linebacker wins the job. Even if the most athletic guy, Dorian Williams, somehow comes out on top, they're not going to ask him to cover these slot receivers one-on-one in man situations. They're going to use leverage to their advantage. And you can see Preston Brown did a damn good job on this play, and the Bills are able to get the sack by Kyle Williams. And I'll bring his end zone look here in a second.
Yeah, I love that's my I don't want to spoil it, but that the exit stunt is my favorite part of this play. But yeah, talking about the coverage piece on the back end, as you highlighted there, you got so that exit stunt, for those who don't know, you've got Jerry Hughes spiking inside, and then Kyle Williams is looping around as they play this little 2-man game, and it results in the sack. Kyle Williams was so good at these 2-man games. Man,
it was him and Hughes and him and Zoe used to run these with such a high rate, and they would just win. You just see that the short corner that this provides to Kyle Williams. Watch that left tackle bring it in right here. Look at this corner. I mean, that's just beautiful, and how tight Kyle plays. He comes right through there, and he's able to bring Brady down. But you can see Brady's looking over the middle, man. He wants to exploit Brown right there, but there's no one open, and that's again what leads to Kyle Williams getting that sack.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like, you've got a good game up front. You've got a great angle from Jerry Hughes on the spike, a nice tight angle from Kyle Williams with great timing. And then look at, like, even if you just leave it paused right, like where it was, Brady, he's looking to that right and he sees basically 3/2 on the back end. And he's like, okay, like that's not going to work. Like the Bills have done a good job on the back end passing this off. 14 is running that corner, but it's getting over the top. Then his eyes go to the middle of the field on the underneath route, but I keep calling him Spencer. It's killing me. Preston Brown creates that collision point and takes his man out. So now you've just erased 3 routes in the distribution. And then by that time, your game up front has worked. This is also a good example of how coverage and pass rush work together and vice versa. But you did a good job, like confusing somebody who doesn't really get confused. Like you played a good game on the back end and up front, and then you executed well on the back end and took away multiple reads from Tom Brady. Brady literally tries to go from 1 to 2 to 3. And each one is like, nope, 1's covered, 2's covered, 3's covered. Sack. Like, and again, you don't have the most athletic linebacker there in the middle, but you play the scheme, you play some games on the back end, you rely on the communication and your strong players on the back end, and guys make a play.
Yeah, it was fun stuff, man. I love watching some of this old film and seeing again what McDermott did when he didn't have the underneath linebackers of Milano and Edmunds as a pairing. And so again, I don't know who's going to win the job. Here's a rep in cover 3 from Spectre. Spectre's right here from preseason. Again, he only got 12 reps in the regular season, but here's a cover 3 rep where it's a middle of the field read. The quarterback's looking out this way. You see the short crossing route right there. So he kind of jumps it, but en route, as he's jumping that route, there's a bender route coming over the middle, and he does a good job getting in that passing lane and getting almost the interception on this play. So as an underneath defender, does Spectre have the athleticism and IQ to play, those cover 3 type looks, or even some of those rat coverages in cover 1? Absolutely. Does he have athleticism when you talk about, RAS scores? Yes, he does, as Andrew pointed out. But I do think he's probably on the lower end of possibility when it comes to starting at Mike linebacker. But I wanted to show, what, he can do it in these zone coverages too. And he's pretty aware, especially in those underneath areas.
Yeah, he's even on this one, like the drop kills me, like the ball skills, like just diamond, man, diamond. Like you're so close with the diamond. He seemed like he actually made a couple plays in the preseason.
Oh yeah, he did.
But it always just seems like from a coverage standpoint, he's always kind of like there's always some kind of connector piece missing. Like he either misses like 1 to 2 or he misses 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. There's always some kind of disconnect. So maybe another year, wiser and a full off season will kind of prop him up and propel him forward a little bit potentially. But to your point, yeah, like with how much is asked of this position mentally.
Well, here, and I had a play. I just didn't put it into our final film room. We talked about quarters coverage, right, guys? Talked about how difficult it is on these linebackers and how it stresses them. So here is that situation where they're in quarters coverage and he's matching a receiver in the slot. And actually that might even be a tight end, but this is that disconnect you talked about when it comes to the coverage, right? And you see the little hesitation move over the middle and that guy's open. And again, it's a good tackle. He limited the play, but this is, what kind of shows up when you put them in those stressful situations where they're responsible over the middle of the field in these quarter coverage look. You can see he's just a half a click slow on this move and he trips up and that guy's able to catch it and get yards after the catch.
Yeah, he gets himself slightly out of position and you see a little bit like some slippery footing there as he tries to like break down. He just overcommits a little too bit. That's actually a really nicely timed route by 82. Well done there. And he's just slightly out of position, but you do see him recover. And I think he's an interesting dark horse as we look at this position, as Andrew's numbers and metrics showed, and I don't think this is anything revelatory to the fan base, like AJ Klein is not that coverage linebacker anymore. He's a thumper. He's a 2-down linebacker. Like you're very comfortable with him, like living in the box and coming forward and making plays or blitzing and rushing the quarterback from a violence perspective. But he's not that 3-down guy anymore in his career. Like can Balin Spector uptick a little bit? No disrespect to Tyrell Dodson, but no thank you. And then that kind of leaves Terrell Bernard as this guy who fits what you want mentally, because there is so much this asked of this position from the shoulders up. and you combine that with his ability to play those match coverages mentally and physically, it seems like he kind of has that inside track. But I like the idea that, if Spector can just connect a little more on those dots and connect those pieces and reduce those errors in the initial part of his responsibility or on the back end, he could be something, because he's got some good size mixed with that athleticism. It could be, a fun, concoction if they can kind of coach him up a little bit. But it just makes for an interesting conversation no matter what, because Eric, this is an important. I know people say like linebackers in a premium position, but it's an important position in this defense.
I think Spector, especially if you look at his preseason last year, he made so many plays against the run.
Yes,
I think he
stacking and shedding, and it was like,
and
whoa.
avoiding blocks. Like, he may be the next Tyrell Dodson after this year. Maybe he's Dodson. He takes Dodson's place after this year. I know Dodson, to bring him back, I think they committed like $3 million to him. So it's I think if Spector doesn't win it, he's going to be, again, that special teams guy, but also maybe be the future Dodson, the future AJ Klein, where he's better against the run. He can fill against the run, but he's so in coverage. It's just hard for me to look beyond. And, a few weeks ago, if you asked me this, I would have been, I said it. I said, I'd be shocked if Bernard was the starting Mike linebacker to start the season, just because of his size and his length and how he lacks some of that. But Bean also said something in a presser, a couple weeks ago around the draft, where he says, maybe these linebackers they're not the best against the run. They're not a stack and shed type group. They don't have the biggest size to defend a run. They're not those hammers of years past, but they believe that based on the philosophy of this defense and this regime, that they're better in coverage. It kind of eliminates or minimizes maybe some of the issues they may see versus the run. And so to me, that immediately screams Terrell Bernard has a serious shot to win the Mike position. And then again, we showed some of the stuff from the shoulders up and how much McDermott trusts Aranda and how they did spend that 3rd round pick on him last year. Maybe it wasn't to play Mike. Maybe it was to be the handcuff to Milano because he's that important to this defense. But obviously they seem to have pivoted, and I do think that Bernard's going to get a real shot here. And I would be shocked at this point, based on some of the coverage stuff we've seen and the intangibles, that if that Dodson starts majority of the snaps this year and not Bernard.
Yeah, I would not be a fan of Dodson starting again. No disrespect, but Eric, when you look at all of it, if you're looking at, whoever's going to start in this position, you look at all of them individually and in a vacuum. But when you look at Bernard, he seems to have the best combination of experience and time on task, combined with his mental processing and communication ability, combined with what he can do on the field. He seems to be like the least deficient in every metric overall.
A decent mix of everything they need, right?
Exactly. Like, you take Klein and you're like, oh, well, he's like really great against the run, but then he's poor against the pass. And then you've got Spector, who you're kind of like, well, he looks promising versus the run, but he's got some issues in coverage. And then Dodson really isn't great at everything. Bernard isn't really amazing at anything, although I would say his processing is like really good.
Really good for a young player.
Absolutely. And he's not really deficient in anything other than just being like, he's not the biggest dude. He doesn't have like the longest arms. He's not like got frame, but like anything else, he ticks a lot of the boxes. It may not be like you're ticking the boxes with pen, you're ticking them with pencil, but like he still ticks most of them in almost the most satisfactory way. Oh, great question from Roy. Roy says, "And who does the tree like at linebacker?" The tree likes Terrell Bernard right now. The tree also grinds tape. Like,
and he's got short limbs, so it does kind of make, he doesn't have the long arms.
That's a great joke. The tree is biased because a lot of the tree is a really great processor, but doesn't have the biggest frame. So the tree is very biased towards Terrell Bernard's kind of game. But again, Eric, like it makes the most sense. The whole idea is you can't fill what Tremaine Edmunds did. Like, it's just not possible because he is that unicorn. So it's just like, okay, how can you mitigate his absence the most? And I still think what's interesting, I know I don't want what I'm about to say, but I also don't rule out the idea of maybe they do like a rotational silo piece where it's Klein on rundowns and then Rapp is that dime linebacker, and that's who's like, I don't want to do that. I don't rule that out, but I really think, yeah, like you said, the inside track goes to Bernard.
I'm glad how you avoided Greg Thompson's word of platooning, because I can't stand it. Okay, so my issue with them doing that, and having watched all of the third downs of 2017 of the, some of the film that we just watched, some of the issues that arose when they were doing it that often were getting caught on the field with certain guys they didn't want on the field.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting called with 12 men on the field. They were having to burn timeouts, which is something that has always been kind of the bugaboo of McDermott. And with him calling the plays, you don't want to have too many different substitutions and personnel groupings, and trying to match and make the perfect matchup versus what's the offense is showing you. So that's where it worried me. And I it's something that came up. I'm like, oh man, I remember this. It was almost like flashback to Vietnam or something, because it was such an issue, because they were trying to get so many guys on the field versus off the field. They didn't want to get caught with Zoe on there when they were in a coverage type look, aside from those low hole drops and stuff like that. So that stuff does come up, and I do worry about that when you have your head coach going back to his roots, calling the plays as a defensive coordinator, and also having to manage a game. And so that's why I worry about the whole platooning thing. But I will say, maybe it comes down to they start X guy at Mike, and then it doesn't work out, and they bring in the second guy, and then they kind of settle on someone. I think maybe that's the way it could shake out. But I do think that in the end, I do expect them to get Taylor Rapp on the field. So I do expect some more of that 3 safety look, those big nickel, whatever you want to call it. I do expect Rapp to be on the field, regardless of who's the Mike linebacker. Even with Bernard, if he wins it, and as good as he is in coverage, Taylor Rapp could still be coming in there to kind of pull him off the field. And because Rapp can do a lot of that stuff underneath as well, just like a linebacker. And he is a sure tackler, which when you have short arms and with Bernard, those are some of the issues that will arise. If he doesn't process quickly, he gets caught in a wash, and he's got to make a tackle on an angle and not the perfect run fitting up the guy. He can miss tackles because of those short arms. And Taylor Rapp, he doesn't do that. He makes tackles. He's a sure tackler. So I do see some of the chess game occurring, regardless of what Mike linebacker does take over.
Absolutely. That's very well said. And I love how you spoke on the platooning. Like, it's so hard to live in that world, to be like, oh, what personnel grouping is the offense in? Okay, you're going on the field, you're coming off. Oh, wait, now they're doing this. Okay, no, you come back and then you go on. Like, it opens you up for error and vulnerability in ways that you don't want and you don't need. It's kind of the opposite of what we're talking about with Dalton Kincaid and the 12 personnel package on offense, where it's like you dictate to the defense and you're so versatile and multiple. It's the opposite. You're now sitting and you're like, well, we're siloed. So now an offense can dictate to us, and now we have to mix and match, and it's stressful and a bit difficult. The Taylor Rapp piece is really interesting. And I want to continue to shout out Chris Kepner, one of our team members here at Cover One, who has decided that and coined the phrase that when Taylor Rapp is on the field, it's called the Raptor package, Rapptor. I think that's very clever, and I'm a fan of puns, so I'm going to try and push that as much as I can. And Eric, I love what you said. Like, granted, maybe the market wasn't great for him, but it's for a Super Bowl winning guy who played a key role on good defenses to come to a team and just be the depth, third safety. It just seems like there should be more to that. And when you look at the tape, like we did earlier this offseason, he's a guy who's still got some juice in the tank and offers some versatility and multiplicity to this Bills defense. So it'll be interesting to see where he fits in, as will be the journey that we take and seeing what happens at this middle linebacker position. I know there's some people in the chat who want it to be Dorian Williams. The people who, like Klein a bit, or who are down on Bernard. It's going to be an interesting camp competition as we roll forward. Awesome, RJ. See, RJ gets it. And it just looks cool, like the Raptor package, and it sounds sweet. Like, let's make it a thing. I need everybody to trumpet that. Eric, as we start to wind down here, any parting thoughts for the people in terms of anything moving forward, or anything on the middle linebacker battle or race, or Sean McDermott, the Bills defense, anything that's on your mind as we send the people on their way?
No, I'm excited. Again, when it comes to the X's and O's stuff, scheme and stuff like that, like you saw in this episode, the projections of like what the defense could look like with some of this personnel, I'm excited about that. But I'm also excited about, what we have in store for this upcoming season with some awesome new sponsors for the show that allow us to do some of the stuff that we do. But also we have some cool guests lined up. We're going to have Ryan Bates back on this offseason, and we're going to have Latavius Murray in a few weeks this offseason. And of course, we're going to have Poyer sometime this season. So we're going to have some more players on as we typically do. New sponsors. Another season of the Film Room is upon us. For camp, I'm sure we're all going to be out there for that as well. I'll be out there for at least one of the weeks. Get an Airbnb again like we did last year. That was a ton of fun. I'm ready. I'm ready for camp. I'm ready to see these new toys and weapons. Dalton Kincaid, if you haven't yet, go watch our episode on him from last week. Go watch the Film Room feature I did on him. That is doing quite well on how this offense, again, could kind of get tweaked a little bit in that philosophy and may change a little and use Kincaid as more of that, slot option, that Cole Beasley type in this offense. Maybe not the volume year one, but he's going to be a huge part of this offense going forward. So I'm excited about this offseason and camp and the new season ahead of us, man. We're going to have some fun in the Film Room as we always do.
Yeah, it's going to be, this season is really exciting offensively and defensively from a schematic and X's and O standpoint, in terms of, for guys like us who watch the tape and really study those technical aspects of the game, because there are so many fun new tricks and toys, like you said, that have been added to the offense and defense, and trying to plot, like, okay, what does Dalton Kincaid add? Or like, how much 12 personnel do they run? And what type of alignments and formations do they run, and play calls out of it? And what do we see from Hardy and Sherfield? And, does Osiris Torrance start? And if he does, like, what kind of changes in the run game do we see? And then defensively, everything's been kind of lining up to what we said when we broke down Bills versus Bengals, that sad game that we broke down. We talked about what we wanted to see from the defense in order to kind of take that next step forward to kind of get over the hump. And part of what we talked about was more for kind of mixing it up and less of a static nature for this defense, and being more diverse in your fronts and having more of an attack mind, and mixing up those man coverage pieces and playing games and all of these things that kind of fit into what Sean McDermott is as a defensive coordinator. So it's starting to come full circle a little bit for what we had kind of laid out in terms of our desires for this defense. So it's extremely exciting to be a Bills fan going into this year, although it is, a bit nerve wracking and filled with some paranoia. And then, Eric, like you said, from a brand perspective, like, so many great things on the docket here on the Cover One channel, and especially in the Film Room, where you're not getting anybody that's breaking down game tape like this, let alone doing it with actual Buffalo Bills players. And the reason they keep coming back or want to do things with us in general is because they enjoy talking ball, and they don't get that really this way. Even from the beat reporters, it's like, oh, hey, man, great game today. Ranch or blue cheese? And it's like, oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for that question. Please smash the like as we put up there on the bottom. Likes are the lifeblood of these live streams. So please, and thank you. Whether you're here live now or watching later, please drop a like on this YouTube video. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review. Also, if you're listening on the podcasting apps and platforms, please, and thank you, subscribe. We have talked about it here in the Film Room. The other shows have talked about it. Whatever your taste is, for any of the shows on Cover One, we had a bit of a snafu from a technical standpoint with a lot of our podcasting apps. So please subscribe to those pieces so we can kind of build that back up again, if you would be so kind. Thank you to everyone who rode with us live here on this episode. Thank you to anybody who watched later, listened later, whatever have you. Thank you to Paul. That's a tremendous comment. We appreciate you. Thank you very much to Mr. Andrew Stasel for joining us for the first half hour of this show, breaking down all the graphs. Thank you very much to AJ, our man behind the scenes, the man who's graduating this week. What?
Yeah, boy.
Look at him growing up so fast. We're so proud. So proud of AJ. Thank you to him. And thank you to anybody who tuned in, whether live, later, whatever have you. Tell all your family, friends, and loved ones about how awesome the show is and about how great the brand is. If you didn't think this show was great, then there's probably something wrong with you and you should look inward. Oh, awesome comment from RJ.
I didn't know that.
Says, Reed Ferguson said he loves watching the Film Room because he learns things about our defense. That's as good as a compliment as you guys can get. I did not know that either.
I didn't know that. Is that true, RJ?
Yeah. Are you making that up, RJ? Are you trying to pull a fast one?
Yeah,
RJ?
yeah.
But I appreciate you if it is true. If not, you kind of fooled us, but you will pay in the long run. We appreciate you folks. Take care of each other. Be kind to one another. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. We will see you next week live Wednesday, May 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern for another episode of the Cover One Film Room. And until then, for myself, Anthony Prohaska, for Eric Turner, I saw that comment in the chat. This has been another episode of the Cover One Film Room. We will see you next week. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.